Come down. Ooh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. Never have to cut you out like right now. You see, I don't have to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me try to marijuana. I was never you good. The vibe was straight. Showed you a couple of things and they feel strange. I treated you right. Everything was a gift from a time to your bag and the color on your lip.
Welcome to the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast, powered by Blue Wire. Shout out to the new company. My name is Michael-Shawn and Christopher. You guys can follow me on whatever Elon Musk is calling that app these days. And my @name has not changed, @Mike Dugar, MikeDugar. Shout out to everyone who is watching or listening via our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Seahawks Man-to-Man is the name of the channel. That's Seahawks Man, the number 2 man. We really appreciate that. Even if you listen mostly on audio, just doing that means a lot to us. The same thing with liking, following, and sharing all content on Seahawks Man-to-Man on Instagram and on TikTok. That means the world. Thank you in advance for that. Chris, go ahead and talk to him.
What is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Christopher Kidd. You can follow me on Twitter at CKIDD206, and you can check me out on Blue Sky as well, CKid206. Again, tons of content for you guys. We just dropped a few clips from our Sunday episode, and we'll have clips throughout the week as we continue on. So we appreciate all the love and support. Make sure you subscribe to our TikTok, Seahawks Man-to-Man, Instagram, Seahawks Man-to-Man as well. But, Mike, it's one big thing, man. And how about that? Seahawks get a dub, so I'm sure there's a lot to get to with one big thing today.
Yeah, it's a positive one big thing, which is great because last time was super negative, justifiably so though. To be fair, we both have watched a little bit of the film. Seahawks got their big win, obviously, and we're gonna talk to Doug Howler, who covers the Cardinals later in the show as well. But just to focus on after rewatching the Niners game, hearing from the players, hearing from Mike Macdonald, I'll start. My one big thing this week is the second level of the defense. You know, I thought that's been the problem area, particularly in the run game for most of the season. If that's the linebackers, that's corners, though not as much. The corners weren't too bad in the run game here and there, but it wasn't like a huge problem. And then safeties were an issue a little bit, you know, and you can always tell another issue because it's just a big play usually is the problem there. And if you notice, there hasn't been big plays in the run game and there weren't any against the 49ers. There was one run of 13 yards by Purdy on a scramble, you know, and if Ty Okada stays on his feet, that's probably just getting pushed out of bounds for 7. You know, McCaffrey had an 11-yard run, but that doesn't count as an explosive per se. Those are usually 12 or more. So they shut that down. They did really well. Chris, I think adjusting for an opponent, I felt this way coming off the game, but then when I rewatched the film of it, that was easily the best second level performance of the season. Like the D-line played fine as well, but I think they've played good in other games. Like they've played as good as the defensive line has played that good before. But I don't think the second level has played as well as it did. And two things stand out, Chris. In the pass game, it looked like they were ahead of the Niners. And that really is the first time I've been able to say that in years. Like really in legit years. It just felt like they were prepared for what was coming, you know, and when it just never looked like that. It looked like they were on their heels every time they play the Niners. Kyle Shanahan's dialing it up. Debo's wide open. Ayuk's wide open. Kittle's wide open. Like when they play the Niners, as you guys know, the Niners seemingly every game they played the Seahawks would just come up with some scheme that was just leave someone butt naked open. And it didn't matter who the quarterback was. Trey Lance has thrown like a 70-yard bomb against these guys. I think that was to Debo. Jimmy G's hitting bombs against these guys. Purdy hitting bombs against these guys. To everybody. Kittle's catching bombs. Ayuk's catching bombs. You know, Debo caught one last year when caught Jamal flat-footed. Like they've just been on their heels against these guys. Play action stuff. Kittle goes nuts. I do think the Niners missed Kittle in this game for what that's worth. They missed him quite a bit because the other tight end did nothing. But I just thought they were ahead. You know, there were some plays, particularly by Ernest, in the passing game where those throws you're seeing usually go by the linebacker's head. There was just one of those, I think, to Jennings for like 20 yards. And then that was it. They were on it. You know, they were on all the deep stuff. I thought Reek, and I'm glad Mike Macdonald said this on Monday, Reek probably played one of his best games. They couldn't get anything on him. He was hardly targeted. I think I only saw like one time when Ricky got open, but the pressure was there, so there was nothing. Spoon, we got asked about Spoon a lot this season. I got asked about him when I did my mailbag last week. I thought he was playing fine this year. He was just doing the right stuff. The ball just wasn't finding him. But I just feel Spoon, when you have guys who play as hard as they do and they just do the right stuff, eventually the ball finds you. I just knew it would. And what do you know? The ball found him a ton in that game. He had a batted pass. I think he had like 3 times where he got his hands on the ball. Like Spoon was just all over it. One of them obviously led to the interception. But then Spoon's tackling was cash. Ernest tackling was cash. I think Kobe like missed like 1 tackle on McCaffrey. And otherwise the DB tackling was cash. But the pass stuff when they looked ahead of them, Chris, that seemed like there's been other games where obviously Mike Macdonald's coaching has shown up. But on Sunday, that felt like a very clearly, oh, okay, this is what they've been looking for, or this is what they were looking for when they hired a new defensive mind. You'll get to the offense with your one big thing, but when I watched that game was very clearly, oh, okay, that's why you hired Mike. And they didn't. And what did the Niners score? 17 points. Maybe they could have scored more, but the Niners look like they were letting the Seahawks dictate terms because they couldn't get to any of their staples in the run game. None of that wide zone stuff. No cutback lanes. There's no cutback lanes. There was like one by Jordan Mason for like an 8-yard run after the turnover, and that was it. McCaffrey was getting hit early, whether it was Tyrese Knight, Ernest Jones, and then because they couldn't get to any of the staples in the run game, they couldn't get to pretty much any of their staples in the passing game. I thought the final throw by Purdy to Debo on like the little end breaker that went way too high, Reek got a hand on it. That was a perfect example. Reek broke on that so well, and Ernest was in the damn way with the throwing window that Purdy had to sail it. And that throw is a 50-yard touchdown pretty much every other time they play the Niners. You know how I know? Because I've seen it. Like they hit that throw so freaking much. Play action, little dig over the middle, Debo's wide open, and everyone's pointing fingers, and then they score. Like even Chris, what I thought was really cool was, I'm sure people felt like this at home too. When Geno turned it over and they got the ball to 27, I was like, oh, this is about to get ugly. McCaffrey's about to score, and the game might get out of hand. And they shut the run game down, forced a field goal, and then it was like, all right, you're still within the game. And a lot of that was the second level. They were tackling really well. I thought Julian Love played a really good game. He's been playing well for most of the season. But then even they inserted Ty Okada into it, and they inserted Ty Okada, Chris. They were basically having Ty Okada and Kobe play like center field all game. They were just like, if you want to throw it, Ty's there and Kobe's there. Which, if I'd have told anyone on listening to this show that in August, I'd have been like, yo, when you play the Niners, they're basically gonna be like, your deep safeties are gonna be Ty Okada and Kobe Bryant. You're probably like, what the hell? We are screwed. And it was fine. There was nothing. Purdy didn't really have ops to challenge either one of them deep, There was one corner route Brock maybe could have threw, but Julian was probably going to pick it. Like it was they were just so in sync. They were sharp, and they knew they were prepared really well. That was a very clearly like we were prepared for what they want to do. All of their staple stuff, all the situational stuff. They were dropping 8 to get Purdy thinking and holding the ball. One of Boye's PBUs was a drop 8 situation, I believe. Like they were really on it in the back end, in the run game and the pass game. And the last thing, also that was really good Spoon. I said it already, but like that's an example of what Spoon's been doing. The ball just ain't coming. Spoon can cover, and even going back and looking at some of those throws that to Juwan Jennings, he was blanketed. Like those were some tough catches. That's why Kyle Shanahan's over in San Fran getting cooked right now by everyone for his offense, because their whole offense was throw contested balls to Juwan Jennings, and that's just not what they're accustomed to down there. And the Seahawks forced that. It was, you ain't gonna hit us with these dig routes. You ain't gonna hit us with no bombs. If Juwan Jennings beats us one-on-one, it is what it is, because that's all you got, and that just wasn't enough. And then last thing, Chris, Ernest Jones might be one of them. He might be one of them because he was looking like he knew all their plays. Like he was finding the ball so well. He was filling out how how Murph was blocking stuff up front. He was feeling how Hank was playing stuff. He just knew when the cutbacks were coming, when McCaffrey was going to stick his foot in the ground. He was shooting gaps. He was getting off blocks from Trent Williams. I think number 64 is one of their other good linebackers. One of their other good linemen. Can't remember his name. But he was getting off blocks from him. Like Ernest was not only evading blocks with like his eyes and knowing where the ball was going, but he was like his long arms were showing up too. Like Ernest was just cash. Like he was arguably probably the best player on the field on Sunday on either side of the ball for either team. Like Ernest was locked in, and that is what they've been missing. They're missing it very clearly, but it just showed up so well. It showed up in the Rams game too, but it really showed up on Sunday, and he just made everything work. You know, if I give an example of a play on the only sack that they got, only clean sack that they got, Draymond Jones ends up sacking Brock Purdy. He beats the right tackle, and Purdy tried to step up in the pocket, but Trent Williams was beat by Boye. The reason that Purdy has nowhere to throw, though, is because Ernest sank into the dig window, and Purdy had to hold it, and then he goes down. Like, Ernest damn near should get an assist for that sack as well. Like, they were just really, really on everything. Really good, clean assignments. I only saw like maybe one or two times where a guy was out of place, but that was easily the best performance from the back end, and it really looked like a reflection, of Mike Macdonald and his guys getting them ready to go. I don't know if that'll be the case every week, but that was very clearly an example of like, oh, Mike Macdonald has you guys right today, and that was a welcome sign because Chris ain't been looking like that. It has not been looked, and they didn't need to like adjust at halftime either, like they did at the Falcons game. It was very clearly from the rip they were ready, and they didn't need to adjust based on getting knocked down or being on their toes. That was very, very impressive. Probably the best coaching performance, I would say, from Mike Macdonald as well, because the Niners just couldn't do anything. That's why they scored 17 points. They just could not do anything. Seahawks were on all the routes, all the run concepts, couldn't get them with any trickery, tackled well. Yeah, it was lights out performance from specifically the second level, and I think if you get that more consistently, you're going to have a really tough team to deal with, because that was a masterful performance, even though they were missing Ayuk and Kittle. Just the way they executed stuff and were ahead of the curve. Brilliant stuff by Mike Macdonald on Sunday.
Yeah, I'll go with the offensive line. And after watching the offensive film, one thing that stood out to me is just Olu Oluwatimi. This is someone that lost his job in April. I'm sure he thought he had a good chance to compete for the position and be the starter for the Seahawks at center. And the Seahawks had other plans. They went with the veteran who just got off a knee injury and had shown that he could be a valuable center. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out the way the Seahawks wanted it to, and Connor Williams ends up retiring. But Olu was just basically the forgotten in this regard. And it's very challenging, I can imagine, having an opportunity, being exciting to go out there and play, be a starter, and then it's just taken away from you. And being in that position of just wanting to play, but you're not going to dress this week. You're going to sit out. You're a healthy scratch, whatever the reason may be. And then week 11 to get the call and to be the starter, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of things going through your head. Like, I got to know the protections. I got to know all this stuff. I got to do my job. And after watching the tape, I said, wow, through all of that, I thought Olu had a fine game. And from the jump, you could see he was waiting for his opportunity, because to kick the game off, the Seahawks come out and they run the football. And Olu snaps it to Geno, King gets the rock, and Olu clears out the way. He does a really good job of he gets a pancake, dare I say, the first play of the game. He just manhandles number 92, Jordan Elliott, defensive tackle, and Olu picks up 6 yards and tackled by Nick Bosa. And I can point out multiple plays in the game where Olu was effective, but from the jump, he got his opportunity and he did a solid job out there, despite everything he had gone through. And obviously, the run game is still an issue. It hasn't been great. They've been up and down. They've had a lot more downs than they've had up. But for Olu, I think that was just a huge opportunity to show that, hey, I do belong and I can play this game. Despite the coaches giving my opportunity to compete to a veteran, he has now showcased, okay, you got some skill. And now it's about building blocks. Can you do it again against a struggling Niners team? Or a struggling Cardinals team that's not great in run defense? And can the Seahawks have some success on the ground? Can Ken Walker have his best game on the ground? And how much of that will be because Abe Lucas is back and doing his job? You got Anthony Bradford. He plays much better. The center position, Olu Oluwatimi, he continues from his success that he had on Sunday against the Niners and does it against the Cardinals. And then at left guard, Laken Tomlinson, he's finding success. And then Charles Cross, he's having an up and down season, but he finalizes it and does his job on Sunday against the Cardinals. So I thought Olu in pass protection had a few really good standout plays that we could probably use for our standout plays on Friday. But the one that I want to go to is right before the 2-minute warning. It's a passing scenario, and he just stonewalls the defender. I believe it's number 94, Yatir Gross-Matos. I cannot say his last name. My goodness.
I think it's Yatir Gross-Matos, dude from Penn
Matos,
State.
yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, he just stonewalls him. Nowhere to go. And hell, it works out just fine because on that specific route, JSN, he falls to go inward and then he gets up and Gino finds him. But if you would watch Olu, the ball snapped, he gets a little chip from the left guard, and then it's one-on-one. Or actually it's from Anthony Bradford, barely even a chip, and then he just locks him. There's nowhere to go. Gino has a little bit of time. He's getting pressure off the edge from Abe's side, but other than that, he is comfortable in the pocket. And again, I mentioned JSN's doing a little crosser route. He falls, gets back up. Gino's able to deliver a strike to him for a first down. Olu definitely showed that he can play some ball. And I don't know why he wasn't starting. Maybe it was more of an issue with his pass protection that they weren't confident in. Nonetheless, they decided to go with Connor Williams, and that was an up and down situation. It just wasn't what the Seahawks wanted. And then on Sunday against the Niners, you saw that, okay, Olu's not that bad. What was the issue here? So I'm excited moving forward to see what Olu does. And I think it's a good learning lesson for him, right? When you get your opportunity, your number's called, you go out there and perform. And I thought when the lights came on, he performed. He had a couple of snaps that you're like, ooh, all right. A couple of run plays like, hey, buddy, we need you to block this guy. But from a totality standpoint, I was, okay, you get a thumbs up from me, Olu. And again, as I mentioned previously, I'm excited to see where he goes moving forward. And maybe this offensive line turns the corner. I remember someone asked a question about, hey, with this Seahawks victory over the Niners, could this propel them for the rest of the season? I don't know, but it very well could. And we shall see what happens. But that's my one big thing after watching the tape is just, okay, offensive line, still has their issues, but Olu stood out to me. Obviously, I could have went with Abe Lucas. Dude hasn't played in almost a damn year, so that would have been an easy one. But I like what Olu was doing for the most part on Sunday against the Niners.
Well, and you know what we're getting to with both of these one big things is areas of weakness that stood tall when called upon. Like you could argue, right guard's probably been their worst position up front, but center been right there. As one of their biggest weaknesses. And then the second level of the defense has easily been the biggest weakness. And what do you know? They were both better. It's not a coincidence that in that game, those were the two most noticeable components, was the second level of the defense and the center, and then they won the game. Like, it's not rocket science why they were losing at these games. And then obviously penalties play a part too. But those two position groups had not been getting it done. And when they get it done, the Seahawks are a much tougher team to beat. Not sure they're a good team, but they're a much tougher team to beat. Yeah, so shout out to Olu. Him and Kobe are showing that sometimes, man, you got to have faith in your draft evals. What was Kobe? Kobe was the what's the DB award in college?
Let me look it up for you. I know what you're talking about.
I think it's Jim Thorpe. Award.
Correct. It is. Yes.
Yeah, he's a Jim Thorpe Award winner. Best DB in the country. By the voters at least. Like, sometimes you just got to trust your eval. Like, sometimes you take that dude for a reason. And then Olu is the whatever the center one is. I think it's like the Remington, I think, or something trophy for the best center or whatever, or interior lineman, whatever it is. He was that. So like, sometimes you just try to trust your eval, man. Like, those guys have had success at the level they're at for a reason. It doesn't always work like that per se, but I was you open with Olu talking about he lost his job pretty quick. It's like, yeah, I was surprised by that. Like, Olu didn't look awful, even last year. So yeah, a good call on that. Shout out to him. Shout out the second level of the defense as well. Because when going forward, spun it forward to the Cardinals. If those two right there, second level of the defense and the center, our money, Chris, that's also how you establish an identity.
Mm.
When you're good in the middle and right up the spine of your team, that's how you become physical. It ain't corners and pass rushers. It's up the middle. It's up the middle. So I'm glad we were kind of in sync on that, because that's huge. Like you said, those two groups play well against the Cardinals. Might have another positive one big thing. Might have another positive one big thing next week. We haven't had. I think last time we had two positive one big things in a row.
I don't think it's happened, Mike. Maybe earlier on the season because they won
earlier. Yeah, they won 3 straight. So
did we start one big thing earlier in the season though? Now I'm trying to remember. I think we didn't. Wasn't that a late addition? I feel like the first couple games we didn't have it.
It is the Remington trophies. I wanted to look that up, but yeah, I'm not sure. But either way, it'll be positive next week.
Yeah.
If those two groups play well, I think it'd be very hard, barring just a really bad game from Geno, like turnover wise, for them to get good play at center and to get good play in the second level of the defense and lose, because of how well the rest of the unit is already constructed. Those two groups were obvious weak links, and now they're a lot better. But the Cardinals, Chris, they're a lot better too. They are. They're the number one team in the NFC West right now. They are 6-4. They're coming to Seattle this Sunday in a big game for both teams, with a lot of playoff and division implications in that one. So coming up next, we're going to talk to one of our Cardinals writer, Doug Haller, covers the Cardinals for The Athletic, does a great job. Help break down this matchup, look at all the different, the defensive side, Kyler Murray, Jonathan Gannon, this new culture that they're building in Arizona. And we're going to get a prediction from Doug as well, who is going to win on Sunday. So here's our conversation with Doug previewing Seahawks Cardinals this Sunday. All right, it is time for our guest. First timer on the Seahawks Man to Man podcast. I am excited about that. He covers the Cardinals for The Athletic. We have Doug Haller joining us. Doug, what up, man? Welcome to the Seahawks Man to Man podcast.
Hey, I'm glad to be here first time. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, the Cardinals, they're normally not in this position. I think everyone's surprised here locally. So I can only imagine what it's like elsewhere. So yeah, good times, ready to go.
Yeah, the Cardinals of the division rivals from the Seahawks perspective have probably been the least interesting over the last 3 or 4 seasons. Not that the games haven't been good, some of them have, but in just terms of interest, the stakes have been pretty low for the most part. Last year's Week 18 had some stakes from the Seahawks perspective, but yeah, we're looking at this is a high leverage game, which we'll get into, and I want to start with this. Perhaps the question that not only Seahawks fans are wondering, but the entire league, at least the NFC. Doug, are the Cardinals good?
Yeah, I mean, up until 3 weeks ago, I mean, I was asking my question. I would have said no. I mean, I would have said no, they're not very good. But throughout these last 4 games, these last 4 wins, they've actually looked like a team that could win the division, and that seems really strange to say that. Everyone thought that when Jonathan Gannon took over a year ago, that it would take maybe 3 years, that this would be, one more building year, that maybe they could get to 7 or 8 wins this year and then maybe fight for a playoff spot next year. But they're ahead of schedule. I was just out at a practice today, a different practice, and someone said, "Could you name 3 players on this defense?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I can." But he goes, "Most people can't. You can name Budda Baker, and then you're stumped." And I think that's kind of the way it is. Just been a surprising season for the Cardinals.
Hold on, Chris. Before your question, let's do a pop quiz. Outside of Budda Baker, I love doing it. Thank you for this, Doug. Can you name 3 non-Budda Baker Cardinals on their defense?
Oh, okay. So I know. Oh man, is Jesse still on the team? Lucetta.
There you go.
There's
2.
Shoot.
He has 1. Budda doesn't count because we know Budda.
There's also a linebacker on that squad. Damn. You know what? Oh my gosh, Max Melton.
Yep.
Wow. What a pull. Wow.
And then there's a linebacker that's really good. He's getting paid like a top 15 linebacker in the league. And why am I drawing a blank on his name? Oh my goodness. Oh man. That's the one guy that I see his face, but I can't remember his name, and it's gonna bug me. And then when who is it, Doug?
Well, you have Zaven Collins
Thank you. Zaven
first
Collins
round
is
draft pick from a few years ago. Malcolm Wilson, not one of the higher paid players, but came over playing really well this year as a linebacker. But yeah, it's kind of a no name type defense. Jalen Thompson is a safety that's been around the league for a
okay.
while.
Go Cougs. I should know that one.
Right. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, who are these guys? And yet, Nick Rollis is their defensive coordinator, young guy. And he really has them playing well. They've given up 2 touchdowns over this 4-game win streak. So, that was the big question. I mean, going into it, guys, they thought, with Marvin Harrison coming in, with Kyler Murray healthy, that they were going to have to outscore everybody. Hasn't been the case. Their defense has been playing well these last few weeks.
You briefly mentioned about locally in Seattle, that no one thought the Cardinals would be where they are right now, leading the NFC West through 12 weeks. In Arizona, how have the fans taken this approach to this team playing good football for the most part? Obviously, the Cardinals players, they feel they deserve this spot, but what's the local feel for this team right now through 12 weeks?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know how it is when there's a coaching change. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury, a couple years ago, fired their GM, Steve Keim, left the organization. So they bring in Monty Ossenfort as their GM. They bring in Jonathan Gannon from the Philadelphia Eagles as their head coach. And, there's that honeymoon period, right? Where everyone is kind of bought in, like, this rebuild might take a couple years. So, but, Monty Ossenfort was kind of stockpiled draft picks that first year that were going to build through the draft. And, Jonathan Gannon was all about setting the culture, getting guys with what he calls winning behavior in the locker room. And so, they won 4 games that first year, and I think everyone was patient. And then this year they've just kind of, found their groove. But I will say, I mean, they were 2-4 coming off one of the worst games that the Cardinals have played in a few years. And that's, that's saying something. At Green Bay, I think the final score is 34-13. They committed 13 penalties, had 3 turnovers, just looked awful. And, that was when I thought, okay, like, they're not going to recover from this. And, you could feel around the community around Arizona that, fans were starting to question for the first time, like, okay, where's this going? 2-4, the Chargers coming up. What do we got going on here? And it just, since then, they've been a different team. James Conner spoke after that loss the next week going into the game against the Cardinals, spoke to the team captain, but a guy whose words are very powerful. They had one of their, you hear this a lot, but the coaches say they had one of their most spirited practices, a training camp type practice after that loss to Green Bay, where it was a little chippy on both sides. And then the schedule, kind of relaxed a little bit. That's certainly a factor in this. But, since then, you know how it is when there's the best seasons are surprise seasons. And now that's where we kind of are in Arizona. The fan base is like, hey, we weren't expecting much, but now all of a sudden, we're starting to see some possibilities.
And Jonathan Gannon is the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, formerly the defensive coordinator of the Eagles. I was the coordinator for that Eagles defense that had a bazillion sacks and went to the Super Bowl in 2022. He was under Nick Sirianni, who had a famously awkward introductory press conference where it just looked like he just had stage fright and tried to picture everyone in the room naked. And then Jonathan Gannon had a similarly awkward kind of viral moment in front of a team meeting as well. And I feel like both of those coaches are showing us, like, we should stop judging the coaches by these team meetings, right? Like, we should judge them by how their teams play and how they coach. And I bring that up to lead into a question about Gannon. How have you seen him try to put his imprint on this team in year 2?
Yeah, it's interesting because, there was a lot of, he wasn't really Arizona's first choice. There was, about how Arizona contacted him. They ended up costing him a draft choice with that. Philadelphia fans couldn't wait to see him leave town. I mean, based on how the Super Bowl ended. So, for a while, just like, who is this guy? Is he the right guy? Is he ready to be a head coach? That was kind of the vibe for the beginning of last year. Like most football coaches, it's, and I hate even bringing this up, it's all about culture. I think it's the most overused cliche and term in sports. But he is very, very, his labeling on winning behavior, and this comes to mind. He walked into the press room one day, and a reporter bought some donuts into the room, and they offered Gannon one. He's like, "That's not winning behavior." I mean, it's his favorite phrase. It's his favorite phrase. But there's a level of accountability that wasn't there under Cliff Kingsbury, and it goes to the extreme of the first few weeks during training camp of last year, when you're asked like, what's changed, what's different, the players will say like, well, if we're late to meetings, we get fined. And he's like, well, of course you're going to get fined. That should be a no-brainer. But those are things that didn't happen under Cliff Kingsbury. So he's just brought a level of accountability that was sorely needed. And then the other thing, which I'm sure you guys will want to talk about, is they've kind of found a way to unlock Kyler Murray, which has been a topic not only in Arizona, but around the league for, his entire 6 years in the NFL. So, for those two things, the accountability, Kyler, those are the two main questions when he took over, and they've established both.
Yeah, the quarterback is how you stay employed around this league. You get that right and get the most out of the dude, you generally can stay employed for a while here. That's for coaches and GMs. And you're right. Let's transition to Kyler, who, Seahawks fans are no stranger to him. See this dude a lot. I remember his first game against the Seahawks. I was talking to some veteran defensive players. They had two conclusions. I think the Cardinals lost pretty convincingly. I want to say in 2019, I think Clowney had like a pick six or something like that, scoop and score. But I remember there was two conclusions generally in the locker room from the defensive guys. They were like, oh, their quarterback is good, which was notable because I think that was like his third or fourth start. And they were like, they should fire the coach. It was like already this basketball on grass thing that Cliff was trying. They were done with. They were like, that's not going to work. He lasted obviously a lot longer than that season, but it's always been very clear that Kyler was going to be that dude. Pete Carroll even said it going into that game that year in 2019. He was like, I'm glad we're getting this guy early because he's very good. And by the time we see him again in the rematch, he'll be much better, and he was. And I think they beat the Seahawks in that game. Man, let me pull up some of Kyler's numbers here. I was looking at this the other night. Kyler is 9th in dropback EPA, 12 passing touchdowns, looks like. Only 3 picks, really high yards per attempt, 7.5. 371 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, not turning the ball over much, not getting sacked much, not getting pressured much, and just looks really confident back there. That's just from the naked eye, from stats and from someone like me who's viewing from far away. Doug, what have you seen in kind of how they've elevated Kyler to playing like a top 10 quarterback right now?
Yeah, Kyler has been throughout his time here. He was the number 1 pick of the draft, and he's always, obviously, all quarterbacks, but especially a guy who goes number 1 is always judged by, can you get us deep into the postseason or to a Super Bowl? And it's been, in 2021, they got off to that 7-0 start. And, he, at that time, he was in the MVP conversation. After that, 2022, doesn't play well, tears his ACL. The next year. And then, so it's been kind of a slow climb, and we've just kind of been in this kind of uncertainty of Kyler, of, what he is, where's he going, and all that. This year, obviously that has changed. And I think you say confidence, you see confidence, those numbers reflect confidence. I think they reflect comfort. He's comfortable with what he's doing. He and Drew Petzing, their offensive coordinator, seem to be really locked in together. He hasn't, just 2 games ago against the Bears, he wasn't great, but at the same time, it was one of the first times in a long time that they didn't need Kyler to be Superman to win a football game easily. They didn't need him to have these crazy runs that we all gotten used to boost the offense, to energize the offense. And then the last game, 22 of 24 against the Jets, that was maybe the best I've seen Kyler. Just in control. I think his first pass he missed. So he missed his first pass, and then he completed 17 in a row. And he's not under pressure to where he has to be a guy that, pulls rabbits out of his hat, to make something out of nothing. So, some people have said that, it's a constant debate here. Is he a top 10 quarterback? Is he a top 12 quarterback? I don't know where he ranks, but I know he's heading that direction. to be a top 10 quarterback, and you can just see it in him. I mean, earlier in his career, I don't know, being the face of the franchise, I don't know if that's something that he really, the media part of it, he really wasn't down with that. I mean, he just didn't seem to enjoy it, didn't really try to get through it. Since he's gotten the contract, since this new coaching staff has come in, we've just seen a different guy and a different player.
Interesting dynamic that is being displayed here. You have the Seahawks quarterback in Geno Smith. He was a backup for a majority of his career, and then he gets the green light. And when you turn on the film, you can watch and see that, oh, he is far better than he was years ago. His
Right.
pocket presence, his arm talent, he can make some of the toughest throws. A lot of people would argue he's top 10. I know Mike and I agree that he is top 10 quarterback in the league. And then you have Kyler Murray that is a nightmare with his legs and then also his arm talent. So when you watch tape and when you rewatch games, Doug, what are you noticing in his talent and what he brings to the Arizona offense and how that could be a problem for the Seahawks defense coming up on Sunday?
Well, he's operating more under center, and really it just has given him more options. What they really have needed to do is get more. You're right about his arm. Everyone usually, when they talk about Kyler Murray, immediately starts with his athletic ability and his legs. He has a really good arm, and that was a huge question going into the season about and the excitement surrounding Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, okay, they have a deep play threat, a big play threat. Last year Arizona's receivers collectively ranked near the bottom of the league in their production. Trey McBride, their tight end, was emerging, becoming a star. That was obvious, but they didn't get the receivers didn't scare anybody. So when Marvin Harrison came in, that was like, okay, that's going to unlock the vertical passing game. It's taken a while for that to develop. A lot of that has been because Marvin Harrison has had to adjust a little bit more than what people think. But lately they've kind of gotten that going a little bit, and that's just kind of opened up a new dynamic of their offense. Before, everyone was kind of focusing on James Conner, stopping him in the run game. But now the Kyler's had more of an opportunity to look downfield. That's just kind of opened up for them.
Interesting enough, we'll go to Marvin Harrison Jr. How has the rookie been this season? How would you grade him so far? Not grade him, but how would you assess his play?
Well, if you look at his numbers, they're pretty good. The 6 touchdowns for a rookie certainly stand out, but maybe it's our fault. I mean, going into it, I mean, you guys read and heard the same things. Everyone was saying that this kid was the best receiving prospect as a receiver in a couple decades, right? In 20 years, maybe the best overall player in the draft. During training camp or during OTAs, Michael Wilson, a fellow receiver, even the coaches were a little bit, but even Jonathan Gannon toward the end, we're talking about Kyler Murray. Certainly, we're saying this kid is pegged he's going to be a number 1 receiver this year. So I think everyone's expectations were I know mine. I mean, at The Athletic, we had like who's going to be the non-quarterback MVP that all 30 one time, and I put out Marvin Harrison Jr. It was apparent from that first game in Buffalo that that wasn't going to be the case, that this is, he was going to need a little bit more time to adjust to this level. He dropped a pass that first game. He ran a wrong route that first game, or he and maybe Kyler, they weren't on the same page. It's taken a while, to the point that people were starting to question, like, was this guy, is he going to be as good as everyone thinks? And the question is, to answer that question is, yeah, he is going to be really good, but it took 5 or 6 games for him to get his feel, to be able to read and react, to understand what the defense is doing. And we're starting to see that now. And that's been a big part of this 4-game win streak, is they finally have gotten him going a little bit. He and Kyler have gotten on the same page.
With the Seahawks defense, they like to just basically go man up at times, and your zone, you're covering that. They don't really do too much doubling. Like, they love their cornerbacks and what they can bring to the team. So I imagine the Seahawks might try to do that with Marvin Harrison Jr. How have you noticed teams playing him in certain matchups?
Yeah, earlier he was getting a lot of attention. A lot of bracketing, double teaming. And Kyler did a good job of not, forcing them the football. A lot of people wanted him to see, like, put the ball in his area. Let's see him make a play. And with the exception of one quarter, we had like 4 catches for 130 yards. That hasn't. It was against the Rams. That hasn't really worked. But as we've gone on, he's gotten a little bit more. Trey McBride has emerged. So, defenses have a little bit more to focus on. So I think that's opened up some things for Marvin. And they're just that, like I said, the vertical passing game was just the one element that they haven't had. And now that they've been able to do that, that's helped Marvin, it's helped Trey McBride, it's helped James Conner. It's helped all of them.
To quantify a little bit what we were talking about, I love you mentioned, Doug, that they're going under center more, which was just like something you just knew they were going to obviously have to do. When they hired Cliff, it was like, dude, when are you going to learn this ain't college, my man? And Kyler was in shotgun. I actually have the percentages right here. Look this up on True Media. The highest under center percentage that Kyler had from 2019 to 2022 was 12.2%. That was his rookie year. In 2023, not that many games, but still, it was 25.5% last year. This year, career high 28.9% under center. Like, just playing big boy football, with that power run game. And to your point about Marvin Harrison, I didn't realize this. He's leading all rookies in receiving touchdowns with 6.
Yeah,
that boy is fine in the end zone. Man, that kid's good.
Yeah, well, I think the for receivers, I think the team high last year was only 4, so he's already past that. So, but yeah, I mean, the whole Kyler Cliff thing kind of got off the rails. I mean, if you remember right, they had Josh Rosen in place. They had just drafted him the previous year when they brought him in, which they made the right move taking Kyler with the number 1 pick in the draft. But it just, as things went on, I don't know if you remember, there was a timeout during a game, and Cliff was screaming on the sideline to try to get Kyler to because the play clock was winding down. They called timeout, and that's Kyler walked to the sideline, pretty much told him to calm the F down. And, it was just kind of a weird dynamic there at the end. And, when they came in, there was still a question, new staff, new GM, Kyler coming off an ACL injury, still recovering. The Cardinals, if you remember right, had a position, or, they had 2 first-round draft picks. They had Houston's in their own. So people were thinking, like, if things go badly, which they expected them to, would they, try to get one of these young quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, if they got the number 1 pick. What does this mean for Kyler? And, Jonathan Gannon and Monty, Andrew Petzing, their offensive coordinator, never flinched, even when he was still, recovering from his ACL injury. I asked Jonathan Gannon about that just the other day. Like, is this what you saw? Is this why, you supported him the way you did? And he said, we always saw him as a premium player. We just had to get him healthy. So that's where they are now.
Glad they saw it that way, because boy, they are right. There ain't that many Kylers out there. There's really just not. Like, he's a small guy. I forget who I was just talking about this with. Somebody asked me about Bryce Young, and I was just like, yeah, it's just hard to play quarterback when you're that small. And they were like, well, what about Kyler? It's like, have you seen the difference between Kyler and Bryce Young? No shade to Bryce, but like, Kyler is a slot receiver with a hose. Like, that is not normal short guy stuff. I mean, dude can just break a 50-yard touchdown with his legs. I mean, at any time, and throw it for 70. That's just not I feel like one of my favorite Kyler plays, and we'll move on to Trey McBride after this, but is the Hail Mary against the Bills for whatever year that was. To get space, he had to basically do a hezzy move on whatever lineman it was to then launch the ball, on a line to D-Hop. Like, that's not, guys who are big are not doing that, let alone someone who's small. Like, Kyler is a premium. That's a perfect way to put it. That's a premium player. Top 10, top 8, top 12, whatever the hell. You ain't finding that in the draft. And I do want to mention, before we get to the defense, one of his favorite targets is Trey McBride, who I don't watch a ton, but every time I look up some tight end stuff, I'm like, he's just around the other good tight ends. Sometimes that's just how you can get a hold of some of these dudes. I'm like, oh, he's got this many as Sam Laporta, or he's next to Kittle in this stat. It must mean he's good, for us who are not watching him every week closely like you are. Yo, what's up with Trey McBride? Is he like a
he's
star
really
in the making?
Yeah, he is. Second round draft pick under the previous front office, one of the few that Steve Keim hit on in his latter years. and you could see him coming a little bit his first couple years in the league, but especially toward the end of last year. But yeah, he's become, I would say he's definitely a top 5 tight end in the league right now. I mean, going into last week, I think he was third in receptions among tight ends. I know that's probably changed. I know it's changed, but physical. I mean, does a great job. We haven't talked about the Cardinals or their offensive line much, but they've been without their starting right guard and right tackle for most of the season. Their tight end room has really helped kind of solidify that, stabilize that, and Trey has been a big part of it. But he makes plays in the passing game. Jonathan Gannon has said that he's elite with the ball in his hands, and he is. He runs hard. He breaks tackles. Locally, it's been a big story. I think the last 3 games in a row. I know he's done it 3 times. He's hurdled a defender, which everyone just goes crazy about for whatever reason. When that happens, it adds energy to the building, to State Farm Stadium. So yeah, he's really taken off as he's an elite player in the offense. There's no doubt about that, and he's somebody that every defensive coordinator that Arizona faces has to game plan against because he's just so effective.
Well, that's bad news for the Seahawks because tight ends has been kind of the question mark. Hunter Henry went crazy, and that was mostly just because guys weren't doing their assignments, and they haven't had to face a really good tight end. The last chance they had was against the Niners Sunday, but he got hurt. He wasn't available. But now I think on Sunday they're going to a good test with McBride to see if they can slow him down. Everybody's on their assignments. But I do want to get to – you mentioned the offensive line, and I do want to focus on James Conner because last time the Seahawks played, I think it was early January of this year before the season ended, he just had his way. 150 yards, 27 carries, and a touchdown. And the Seahawks defense have now found their aha moment, and they did a really good job of slowing down Christian McCaffrey. So have the Cardinals had their aha moment on the ground where blocking was really good, James Conner had a really good day on Sunday, or do you see that kind of still in the wait, and maybe they can do that against the Seahawks defense that has also found their aha moment?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's interesting, and this is usually how it goes. When you talk about the Cardinals, you talk about Kyler, you talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., you talk about Trey McBride, and then, oh yeah, by the way, there's James Conner. And really, James Conner is kind of like their energy source. I mean, they establish him at the beginning of the game and in the fourth quarter when they need to either put the game away or even if they're like driving for, the go-ahead touchdown as they did against Miami, he's heavily involved. He leads the league in broken tackles. He's just a fierce runner that just kind of energizes everybody. So yeah, I mean, they're going to ride every week. They ride him as much as they can. Against Miami a few weeks back, the Dolphins shut him down the entire game. And then, the Cardinals get the ball back 5 minutes to go, down 2. And, James has the game-defining run that leads them to win. That's who he is. There's probably not a more respected guy in the locker room than James Conner. Captain, just always seems to kind of say and make the right play when it's needed. So it'll be interesting to, Seattle coming off that game, if they can slow him down. Because I do think even though Kyler's playing at a high level right now, the Cardinals need him. They've run the ball pretty well all year. They need him to be a factor in some way.
And that game that Chris referenced, James Conner with the $150 last season, that was by far his best performance against the Seahawks in his career. But prior to that, he had never eclipsed 62 yards on the ground in a game, and just kind of went bonkers in that game last year. We joked about the defense kind of being a bunch of no names, relatively speaking. There is a name that everyone in Seattle knows. That's LJ Collier is on that. I can't believe I went this long without mentioning the revenge game factor in this. DJ Dallas also on the Cardinals. Evan Brown, I believe, on the Cardinals as well. So we got a lot of revenge action going. I know DJ wants that smoke with his former team, but we'll stay on the defense here before we get your game prediction. So I'm not gonna lie, I went into the season being like, I don't think the Cardinals defense is gonna be good. Who are these dudes? Particularly in the premium spots, corner, edge, stuff like that. And then I watched some film, looked it up this week. I'm like, I kind of still feel that way, but you're right, Doug. The numbers have been good. So I guess who's balling out of their mind? I guess that's not Budda. That's getting these numbers to be where they are. Or I guess is it a function of maybe the last couple weeks? They've played I think the Bears and the Jets. Two really bad offenses. Like what's going on? Who's playing above their skis right now? That's
that's the unknown in this is that this is a team that's really struggled to impact the passer. Ranked near in the bottom of all the pass rush categories for most of the season, and yet they sacked Caleb Williams 6 times when they beat the Bears. So the numbers have have increased sharply here recently. But they're a defense that has struggled. They're beat up. They lost. They're really counting on a second year guy named B.J. Ojulari, second round pick out of LSU to really kind of be that pass rusher. He tore his ACL in camp. Dennis Gardeck has been a pretty good specialist, tore his ACL about 6 weeks into the season. So they've really kind of struggled. They brought in Baron Browning. They just made a trade, a guy in Denver who's had some injury history, but maybe some potential. So they took a flyer on him. But really, I mean, obviously Budda sets the standard there. Budda is obviously one of the best at what he does, but this is the best I've seen Budda. He's just, and obviously, he's going to be a free agent coming up at the end of the year. I don't know if that's related, but he is just all over the field, and I've never seen him better. But you mentioned the secondary. That's been a problem with Arizona for years. Garrett Williams is a guy that's really come along. He's a guy that Monty Ossenfort drafted, really playing at a high level. He looks like he could be a guy that's going to stick around and really do some good things. Max Melton, you mentioned, a rookie, has played well. Jalen Thompson's been banged up at that other safety spot, but when he's healthy, he's good. So the back end has been better, I think, than people expected. The defensive line has been banged up all year. That's always kind of an iffy situation. The linebackers have been, Mac Wilson, as I mentioned earlier, has played at a high level. They brought him in this year. They need a little bit more probably out of Zaven Collins. They drafted him as an inside backer, moved him down on the edge. He's starting to kind of show some signs there. But for the most part, it's a group that just, plays hard. That's kind of cliche, but, they don't miss many tackles. They don't, not a lot of penalties, not a lot of roughing penalties. They've been pretty solid. And I will say, they drafted in the first round, the end of the first round, they had 2 draft picks. Darius Robinson, a defensive lineman who's been out all year with a calf injury. He started practicing this week. Now, whether or not he could get back for this game against Seattle, I think it may be the following week. If he does, he's not going to play a lot. But during preseason, before he injured that calf, he looked pretty impressive. So they do think that they're getting a boost there whenever they can get him on the field.
Yeah, for just to quantify Budda real fast, this is nuts, man. How does he have 100 tackles already?
I know.
What? Oh my God! Let me check my notes here. I think there's only 6 guys in the league right now with 100 tackles, and Budda's one of them. That is just bonkers. And it's not like sometimes you see safeties leading the league in tackles. Me and Chris are both Wazoo grads. My final year with Deion Buchanan, former Cardinals high draft pick. Deion had like 100 something tackles his final year at Wazoo, but that's because we stunk, right? So he was doing a lot of cleanup duty.
Right.
It was like Budda's getting like TFLs and like tackles for 3-yard gains. Like, it's not new. He's been a Pro Bowler forever, but dog, this guy's a missile.
There's been some talk around here about whether he could get in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation, and I mean, I don't think so, just because you know how those awards go. You need high level, you need big numbers, whether it's sacks, interceptions, whatever. And he doesn't have that, but he has had that kind of impact. He has played at that level. I mean, he's been great throughout his career, and I'm not alone in this. To me, this is the best he's looked. He's really playing, and you think like he's been around forever. He's only 28, so he's a guy that not slowing down at all.
Yeah, That dude. I mean, Seahawks fans know. Everyone around here knows
Right,
Budda.
yeah.
He's from over here. You know, he plays here multiple times a year. You know, the DK play with the chase down. But it's just, yeah, it's crazy. Every year, I was just looking at his Pro Football Reference while you were just talking. This dude's like made the Pro Bowl a bazillion times.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
like
and it's
this dude
interesting because
special.
he's gonna he's a free agent. So when they were 2-4 coming off that Packers game, there was a lot of talk about possibly should the Cardinals trade him at the deadline, just to get something back for him. You would think that they would have worked out an extension. Now we're starting to hear a little bit more about that might be possible. But at that time, that was floated out there. Maybe it's time to trade Budda. Larry Fitzgerald obviously is, when you think about Cardinals players and their impact in the community, Larry Fitzgerald is really, really high. Kurt Warner's up there, but Budda needs to be higher because he's been here his entire career. He's a low maintenance type of guy for the most part. He just goes out there, does his job. Great leader. You guys know all this. I mean, that's been Budda for his entire career, but yeah, definitely playing at an elite level.
And I'm happy he's on a good team, man. I could just, for some reason, it's just burned in my brain, the Hard Knocks speech from whatever season that was. And I know he was playing through a bad ankle, I think, at the time. Yeah, he was like, I'm tired of losing. I'm like, no, you know what, Budda? I'm tired of watching y'all lose, for real. So I'm glad that those guys are having some success. Him in particular, success. Good segue there. It is time, Doug, for your first ever Seahawks man-to-man game prediction and over/under. Chris, which one are we starting with? Doug,
go ahead and go with over/under. Why not?
Okay. All right, let's go with our over/under here. We're going to start with James Conner. In the spirit of the Seahawks kind of finding their, like Chris said, their aha moment in the run game. Done a good job. They held Kyren Williams under 70 yards, held Christian McCaffrey under 80. So let's go with total scrimmage yards for James Conner. I think he's averaging about 69 on the ground, a handful more through the air. So let's put it right at 99.5 scrimmage yards for James Conner. What are you going with, Doug? Over or under?
Yeah, you mentioned they have been getting him more involved in the passing game, but I'm going to go with the under on that.
All right. That might shape the prediction here if I can guess. All right, what you got, Doug? Give us I think the game's a pick 'em right now. Is that what we're going with, Chris, on the line?
Yeah, it's back and forth, and I assume it's probably going to continue that, so we'll just go with that.
Yeah, the line may move based on Doug's prediction here. You never know. So, all right. Give us a score, Doug. What's going to happen on Sunday?
I will just say this quickly. I've been wrong on the Cardinals. Like I said, I thought they were done a few weeks ago. I'm going to, despite taking the under on James's total yards, I'm going to go 24-23 Arizona. That they find a way to keep this going for at least one more week.
Write that down, Chris. If the line moves, we know the source of it. We know it was Doug that moved the line. And that's interesting because I think Chris and I were looking up the line before we got on. Chris saw it as Cardinals +1 somewhere. I saw it as Seahawks -1 somewhere. Chris saw it as a pick 'em. All right, so we saw both teams favorited or as the favorite in different places and a pick 'em. Like Vegas has no idea what to do with this game,
Well, it's the West. I mean, it's the NFC West. I mean, you have one team that's won 4 in a row, but the other 3 teams are really difficult to get a handle on. I mean, it's just been anytime you think somebody's getting healthy or, gets a big win, it changes the next week. It's been really difficult to kind of figure out.
Yeah, no one knows who's even going to win this division. This game goes a long way. The winner of this game has a great shot at winning the division. The loser has a great shot at going to Cabo in January. So, thank you, Doug, for making your debut on the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast. The floor is yours. You want to plug anything, social media, stories, anything? Floor is yours before we get out of here.
I appreciate that. We talked a lot about James Conner, and I sat down with James just before the Jets game and talked about a few things and watched a couple of his runs. So I'm excited about that. That should be publishing here within the next couple of days. So keep an eye on that. That kind of, I hopefully shows just what his value is to this team.
Hashtag running backs matter. There we go.
Yes.
From Doug. I am Mike. That's Chris. That is our guest, Doug, making his debut. Covers the Cardinals for The Athletic. Does a great job. Make sure you guys check out his work and his James Conner profile coming out this week. Thank you guys for tapping in to Seahawks Man to Man podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok. The handle on both of those is Seahawks Man, the number 2 man. We appreciate the love and support. We will come back to you guys with our YouTube exclusive later in the week, our standout plays. Until then, we'll catch you after the game. Have a good week. Peace.